The one that started them all, Iron Man. Spoilers ahead, let's get into it. Iron Man came out in 2008, the beginning of the MCU, which I am so thankful for, and really the main reason why I'm starting this channel. I remember when Iron Man was getting ready to be released, there was a lot of anticipation for this movie. No one knew who Iron Man was except for comic book nerds. I mean, he was, you had the X-Men, you had Spider-Man, and that was pretty much it. And then people didn't realize that Superman and Batman were from different companies. And it's really cool to think about Iron Man way back when, before the explosion of the MCU. So I'm going through the Marvel and DC cinematic universes for the beginning of this channel. After that, I'm going to probably hit up Star Wars and, well, that's already right there. That's like 30, 40 movies. After that, there will be plenty of other movies for me to cover. But for right now, the MCU and DCEU it is. We start the movie off with Tony Stark. We start off with a flashback into his past where we can see that he is a self-conceited, narcissistic billionaire playboy. And we have basically what amounts to a hero's journey, where you start off in one place, you go through trials and tribulations, and then you go through trials, and then you meet some obstacles, you overcome them, and then you end up as a different person than you were at the beginning of the journey. While he's in the cave, he meets Jensen, the first of many disposable minority sidekick characters that will advance the hero protagonist and quickly be discarded. Awesome. I don't know why, as I'm getting ready to do these reviews, I'm more and more aware of how many disposable minority characters there are. You have Jensen, you have Wong. I was familiar with the origin of the Iron Man story, and I thought that they were going to do a twist with Jensen. I thought that he was going to be secretly a bad guy, placed there by the Ten Rings in order to subvert something nefarious. But no, he was just a very loyal, likable, disposable character to get Iron Man started on his journey, which is fine. But yeah, it's funny because just the more I reflect on movies in general, but including the MCU movies, there are quite a lot of disposable sidekick minority characters. And in fact, when I see a minority character on screen, I'm kind of waiting for them to get kicked off, killed, shunted aside, and it's unfortunate. Iron Man escapes building the Iron Man Mark I suit, and here his journey truly begins, where we go through the stages of him building out the rockets for his boots, testing out the repulsors, getting the interface ready, all the controls ready, and it is a glorious sight. I remember when Iron Man was not yet released, they released teaser footage of when Iron Man is flying next to those fighter planes. It looked really awesome. But then people were like, no, actually, that was just proof of concept footage. They're actually not going to have Iron Man fly in the movie. And I remember people are like, what the hell, man? Like, if you're not going to have Iron Man fly, then what's the point? And it just goes to show how much farther Iron Man exceeded expectations. It blew them through the roof. So as we go through the scene, it's a really cool scene, a sequence of scenes where Iron Man is building up his suit. And here you feel like this world is very, very, very grounded. I mean, from the beginning it was grounded, but when you get into that more fantastical element of Iron Man flying around and shooting lasers and stuff, you realize how grounded it is, how, oh yeah, they actually do serve a practical purpose, those repulsor rays, to stabilize himself while he's flying or floating in air. They do a great job of making that world seem plausible, which they hadn't really done before, where you feel like it's grounded in a science, at least comic book science. Along this journey, he meets up with Obadiah Stane, his father's best friend and Tony Stark's mentor, played brilliantly by Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges is awesome. He's an awesome actor, seems like an awesome person, and he crushes it in this role. Looking back, of course he's a bad guy, right? Obadiah Stane is his name, and he has this badass bald haircut with this scruffy beard. But I remember being surprised because, you know what, when I watch a movie, I just kind of buy into the world that they're giving me, and I'm just along for the ride. So I was like, oh damn, he's a bad guy. I thought it was just going to be Iron Man versus the Ten Rings, kind of a standard They do a great job of setting up the leader, the quote-unquote leader, even though he's not really the leader, of the Ten Rings, played by Captain Kirk's father's captain from Star Trek. But that's another story. Jeff Bridges does a great job of playing this character with weightiness, with real emotional depth, a real menace to his dialogue and to his presence and to his threats. Once you realize he's a bad guy, you're like, damn, don't mess with Obadiah Stane, man. He's a really bad guy. Finally, Iron Man is doing some good in the world, and then he learns that Obadiah Stane is the bad guy, is the one who sold him up to the Ten Rings, is the one who tried to have him killed, and is the one who is trying to steal his company away from him. And so we go into the third act, where him and Obadiah Stane, aka Ironmonger, go head to head, and they fight, and things blow up, and then Iron Man wins. The end. Yay. And I would say that the third act was by far the weakest part of this movie, which is an unfortunate trend that you'll see later on, where you have the main antagonist who mirrors the powers of the protagonist, and they go head to head in this bush battle where things get destroyed and blown up. And that's fine, and maybe it is a necessity for this kind of movie, but it's unfortunate that the third act is so much weaker compared to the first two acts, where they do this brilliant job of setting up the universe, setting up the story, setting up the character motivations and who they are, and then it just results in this fireworks, boing, boing, boing kind of thing. Lastly, I have to add, we have the introduction of Agent Coulson from S.H.I.E.L.D., and they have S.H.I.E.L.D. Clark Gregg, or was it Greg Clark? Great actor, and it's so cool to have S.H.I.E.L.D. in this movie. I remember at the end credits scene, when you have Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury talking about the Avenger Initiative, my mind exploded, and that was awesome, and it's still awesome, and I'm so glad that exists. And if you understand the meta story behind that, so there was another comic book series called The Ultimates, which rebooted the Avengers and the Marvel Universe for a more contemporary world, because the Avengers was created in the 60s. So they remade the Ultimates for the 21st century. I think it came out in the early 2000s, if my memory is correct. And the actor that they had playing Nick Fury, and the character of Nick Fury, his appearance was based on the actor Samuel Jackson. So they remade Nick Fury to look like Samuel Jackson, and then Samuel Jackson played Nick Fury in a movie a couple decades later, which is awesome. For my personal reaction, I am forever grateful that this movie exists. It started off the MCU. It started off this world where nerddom and comic book geekness is accepted and even mainstream, which is, it still surprises me to this day. It was a validation of Jon Favreau's talent as a filmmaker, and I've been a fan of his since the movie Swingers. Iron Man was part of the redemption story for Robert Downey Jr., who was long heralded as a very talented but troubled actor. And this performance, along with Tropic Thunder, cemented his status as a leading man and as someone who was to be taken seriously and someone who was redeemed through this performance and through this franchise. And watching Iron Man made me think of all of those things as I was watching it, and I was like, damn, this is such kind of it's such a good story all around. So let's get into the numbers. For production and story, I give this a 10 out of 10. It was the first of its kind to take a comic book movie seriously and not over stylize it and not make it weird like Batman or all leathery like the X-Men series. It had great, amazing special effects that made Iron Man feel so tangible, so real, that you bought into this world. You also have amazing performances from Robert Downey Jr., from Jeff Bridges, from Gwyneth Paltrow, who I didn't mention, but she is great as Pepper Potts, and she and Tony Stark have this wonderful chemistry together. So I give it a 10 out of 10. For my personal reaction, this is the genesis of a franchise of movies that I thoroughly enjoy, and I look forward to watching for years to come. It blows my mind still to see such amazing effects and stories put onto the big screen for me to enjoy. I give it a 9 out of 10. which leads to an average score of 9.5. It's not a perfect movie, and the movie hints at future weaknesses of MCU movies in particular that are going to be repeated over and over and over again. But for this first one, I feel like it deserves special credit for being the first out of the 8 to successfully do a comic book version. What did you think about Iron Man? Is it a maybe perfect comic book movie? Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it. Thanks.